Okay, I think we are ready to begin the session. So now, formally, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is José Rafael Medina. I am a member and translator for Hearts on Venezuela. Hearts on Venezuela is a solidarity movement born from the initiative of local human rights organizations to elevate local analysis, experience, and data to an English-speaking audience. Today, I will also be your moderator. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that if you're watching us on Zoom, there is an icon in the bottom right of your screen showing the option for interpretation into English or Spanish for those of you who want to follow the conversation in one language or the other. When clicking on interpretation in the bottom right of your screen, make sure to also click on the option Mute Original Audio to avoid overlapping between the two voices. Today's interpretation services are provided by Hearts on Venezuela. Now in Spanish. Antes de comenzar, me gustaría recordarles que si nos están viendo con Zoom, hay un icono en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla que muestra la opción de interpretación al inglés o al español para aquellos de ustedes que quieran seguir la conversación en un idioma o en otro. Si optas por la opción de interpretación, asegúrate de activar la opción de silenciar audio original para evitar interferencias entre las dos voces. El servicio de interpretación de hoy será ofrecido por Hearts on Venezuela. So, we're here today to talk about a recent study regarding the state of Venezuelan consular services prepared by the Human Rights Center at Andrés Bello Catholic University and based on interviews conducted between December 2020 and March 2021 in several countries of the Americas and Europe. As a result of the declaration of a transitional government in Venezuela in January 23, 2019, relations between several states and the government represented by Nicolás Maduro were severed. This dynamic was not limited to the diplomatic sphere, but also affected consular relations in many cases. This circumstance has resulted in millions of Venezuelan nationals residing in countries that do not have Venezuelan consular services facing a situation of legal defenselessness. However, it is worth mentioning that even before the political crisis of 2019, Venezuelan nationals abroad faced serious challenges to obtain documents and certifications required by receiving countries, as consular services were usually considered to be deficient. The absence of consular services affects the exercise of the rights of the Venezuelan population abroad due to the restriction in accessing documents that can only be issued by the state of Venezuela, as well as the impossibility of carrying out procedures before the authorities of the receiving countries and the absence of social, economic, and legal assistance in cases of emergency. After our panelist presentations, we will take questions from the audience so you can engage in the conversation. So remember that we have the Q&A section and we have the chat section in the bottom of your screen where you can type your question. If you see a very important question in the Q&A section or a question that is very similar to yours, you can hit the like button on that question in order to highlight and bring it to the top of the list. A las personas que nos escuchan en español, también vamos a tener abierta la sección de chat y de preguntas y respuestas, donde podrán escribir sus respuestas. De esta manera pueden involucrarse en la conversación con nosotros el día de hoy. Having said this, we now begin with a presentation of Defenseless, the impact of the absence of consular services on the rights of the Venezuelan population abroad. A report prepared by the Human Rights Center at Andrés Bello Catholic University and the discussion of the experiences of Venezuelan nationals abroad, the psychological impacts of this situation on our migrants, and the efforts of civil society organizations. We are going to begin with our first panelist, Ligia Bolívar. Ligia is a sociologist with postgraduate studies on human rights. She's an associate researcher at the Human Rights Center of the Andrés Bello Catholic University, responsible for the area of migrants and refugee rights and the director of this study. Ligia is going to conduct a presentation of the report. Good morning, Ligia. Thank you for joining us today from Bogotá.
Hi, good morning to everyone, and thank you, José Rafael. Thanks to the co-organizers of this activity, and especially to all of you who accepted our invitation. Both the report and these activities are focused on the situation of Venezuelans in countries where there is no consular representation. However, I would like to begin by explaining what is happening inside Venezuela with the documents in order to understand the complexity of this situation. The difficulty in obtaining a passport is probably the most visible one, but it's only a factor in a long chain that begins with the impossibility of processing a live birth certificate, which is a document that is produced on a special paper that began to be scarce in Venezuela since 2018. And according to estimates by a local NGO called Co-organizado, during that year, more than 270,000 children were left without this certificate. And the lack of this certificate prevents the civil registration of newborns also. Also in ID card services as well as passport services have been suspended due to the lack of material, giving rise to an increase in informal intermediates and a wide network of corruption to obtain all kinds of identification documents. On the other hand, the apostille of other documents is also subject to the will of corrupt officials, which makes it almost impossible for a citizen which limit the resources or who resist to pay the high bribes required to carry out this procedure. As a consequence, people from Venezuela not only don't have identification documents, but they leave the country also without the certification of authenticity, of professional titles, school qualifications, etc. While it is true that measures have recently been taken to expedite the processing of passports and apostilles, the barriers are still enormous. The cost of a passport suffered an increase of 3,500% in 2019, which is the equivalent to 17 years of minimum wage to pay for the fees of a new passport and 8.5 years to pay for an extension of the passport, of the validity of the passports. The electronic apostille began to be enabled in also in 2019, but it can only be used to outside the country for driver's licenses and criminal record certificates. So the rest of the apostille procedures must be carried out in person in Venezuela. So that doesn't help for people who are living abroad. Because of this situation, the report concludes that, and I quote, in this context, it is unrealistic for recipient country to require from people in need of international protection coming from Venezuela documents that the Venezuelan state doesn't produce or certify. Once outside the country, the Venezuelan population that moves to other places where there are no consular service face several limitations, and now I'm going to present them. Here I want to make a parenthesis to explain the different scenarios that Venezuelans face. First, there are countries in which the Maduro government maintains consular relations. In some cities, the service work well, and in others with the deficiencies, with some deficiencies, but at least they are authorized to carry out all kinds of consular procedures. Second, there are other countries that don't recognize Maduro, but they have no broken consular relations in order to protect their citizens in Venezuela, as is the case of Peru, for example. In these countries, there is a duality because the consular service of Maduro officials and the representation of the transitional government coexist. And sometimes people don't know where to go, and there is no information about it. Third, other countries have broken diplomatic and consular relations with the Maduro regime, where representatives of the transitional government are recognized, but have limited capacity to carry out consular procedures. This is where the biggest problems arise and where the report was most focused. But in addition to this, another scenario is emerging recently. Countries that recognize Guaidó as a president and maintain consular relations with the Maduro government, but are not authorizing new visas for Maduro's diplomatic or consular officials. So the consulate remain, but with very reduced capacity to operate and at risk of being left without officials accredited in the short or midterm. And that is happening in places like Canada and France, for example. So what happens where there are no consular services or these are limited? We have different problems impacting rights of Venezuelans abroad. One of the main problems is related to the impossibility of obtaining a new passport or extending an existing one. Not having a passport not only affects the movement, the free movement, but a passport can also be an identity document for a foreigner to carry out certain procedures, such as opening a bank account, having access to financial products, or obtaining visa to stay in a regular status in a receiving country. We learned of various cases of people who have their right to family reunification affected due to the impossibility of obtaining a new passport or an extension. Many people left Venezuela and left their relatives behind, expecting to take them to their new place of residence as soon as they have found the stability and resources to do so. However, during this time, the relatives who remain in Venezuela find themselves trapped and unable to reunite with their relatives abroad due to the difficulties to obtain a passport. And the other is also true. I mean, people abroad that cannot return to Venezuela because they can enter the country with a non-valid passport, but they cannot leave the country with a non-valid passport. So there are families that cannot see their relatives inside or outside the country because of this. And of course, not having a passport also constitutes a barrier for accessing the right to health beyond emergency care, including sexual and reproductive health, for example. There have been cases of people that cannot, women that cannot take a procedure to interruption of a pregnancy because of lack of identity and documents. We also received testimonies from people who have lost their jobs opportunities due to the expiration of their passport, because in some countries, if the passport is not valid, they cannot stamp a visa in the passport, and that has consequences in jobs and in other areas. But apart from the passport, there are other aspects of the right to identity that are being affected by the absence of consular services, such as the registration of children born to Venezuelan parents in countries without consular services. Also, granting of powers to authorities can only be done through a consulate. And this possibility is not available to Venezuelans who need to authorize another person to represent them in Venezuela. And this affects their ability to buy or to sell real estate and other assets, and to conduct other affairs before the administration or in the private sector. The same happened with the certificate of life, known in Spanish as fe de vida, which is a document required by public and private institutions for the payment of pensions. And in some countries that is impossible to obtain because you need to obtain that through the consular services. Also, the certification of academic diplomas can only be done by a consulate, and the impossibility of carrying out this procedure may affect the right to work and an adequate standard of living for people, considering that qualified individuals may not be able to get a job. And finally, consular assistance for cases such as medical emergencies or contingencies due to accidents or theft, as well as consular assistance for people deprived of liberty, is one area with limited attention, both by the consulates in the hands of the representative of Maduro administration, as well as in those in hands of representatives of the transitional government. Several states have adopted measures to take the requirements for people with Venezuelan citizens more flexible. Among the measures adopted is the recognition of the validity of the expired passport for periods between 2 to 5 years, flexibility in the registration of children of Venezuelan to avoid statelessness, and exceptions of apostille or legalization of academic degrees, among others. That is happening in very few countries, but it's happening. These are undoubtedly positive measures, but they are still insufficient to solve the complex situation that the Venezuelan population is facing outside the country. So that's why we stress that the political and ideological differences between governments should not affect the exercise of their citizens' rights. It is important to emphasize that re-establishing consular services does not imply recognition of the legitimacy of the government, and that's why we request countries, including both Venezuela and other countries, to reestablish this consular service. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ligia, for making visible all the obstacles faced by Venezuelan nationals abroad in obtaining documentation for identity, work, study. This is definitely a situation that violates the rights of so many Venezuelans abroad. Before we move on, I would like to remind you that the chat and the Q&A sections are open for your participation. I would also like to let you know that the link to the report of the Center of Human Rights is available in English and in Spanish in the Zoom chat. I just typed the link, as well as a video that accompanied this report. Now we welcome our second panelist, Julio César López. Julio César is a mechanical engineer and founder and moderator of the Facebook group Pasaportes Venezolanos Exterior, a group created to assist Venezuelan nationals in obtaining a passport abroad. The group was created in June 2017 and now has over 28,000 members. Good afternoon to you in Ireland. Julio César, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Jose. Well, as Jose commented, I am part of the group Pasaportes Venezolanos Exterior. This group was created as consequence of all the problems that we have to get our documentation, and also to provide information to another Venezuelans that are requiring support that is not giving the institution responsible of this. And with this, we are also looking to reduce the corruption and the intervention of third parties that are taking advantage of this. I'm going to present, as Ligia commented before, there is many issues related to the not presence of a consulate or a valid consulate on a country for us, for the Venezuelan, for different services that we sometimes require from them. I got a presentation that I'm gonna share now. This is a simple presentation. Well, before then, everything, I would like to thank everybody that is present now, and also the institution that has been like the consulate, the people on consulate, and also institutions, nationals from countries where we're living now that has been flexible with us and are trying to help us on this problem. About general experiences, well, Ligia has commented already about them. There is many different of experience that are affecting us due to we don't have a consulate presence on all the countries, and also that is reasonable that it's not in that way because it's impossible. That should be in many countries, but we could get the help from the consulates assigned for those countries. In relation to the documents, that is the main reason, or well, the main problem that we could get as consequence of this. We have the passport, that is our identification document to use on other countries. We have issues that are in different way presented for adults and underage. For adults, we have the extensions and renewals. We know that this is a problem as consequence. It's not a problem. Main problem for consulate is a problem that we have from Venezuela, from the institution that is in charge to create the documents. For the adult passport, we have the issue that we have is that we need at least to be once sometimes on the consulate. For example, for the extension, we can request the document will arrive to the consulate. Some consulate accept to send the document to your country of residence or to your current address. Other countries doesn't allow it. Other consulate doesn't allow it, and you have to go presential to take the document. That creates a problem for us because usually the institution, the SAIME, is taking a long time to create the document and to provide us the document. More on this time that we have the pandemic, where the institution has not been working properly, and due to hygienic reasons or due to a lack of resources. In this case, for the extension, we should need to go to the country to take the extension and stamped on our passport. But sometimes our passport is already expired due to the time that we have waiting for it. The same case, but worse, happened with the passport for adults. On the renewals, because for the renewals we need maximum to go twice. Once to get the capture of the picture that they need, and also the fingerprints to send to the SAIME, and SAIME made the document based on that. And then we could need also to go to take the document back once that the document is created. For that reason, this represents a huge problem for us, because when the passport is expired, we can travel around, and there is, for example, countries as islands that we are on an island, and we need to take a flight. It's mandatory to take a flight, and you want to get on the plane if you don't have a valid passport. For the reason, it's important the support for the countries where we are living, and also to create some kind of solution from the institution in charge, that is SAIME, and the consulate that is providing us the service or the link with the SAIME. Also related to that, we have the problem for the underage. The underage people, sometimes not always, on certain age, they need to get the identity card. This identity card is not provided on the consulate, and if you're living abroad, you will need to go to the country to get the identity card. That's a huge problem for them, because after they got older than 18, they would need, it's mandatory that they need an identity card. This should be provided by the consulate. That is a big problem that we have currently. In relation to the responsibility of consulate and SAIME, there is some consulate that they are providing all the help that they can. Even they are sometimes requesting information from SAIME and this kind of stuff, but there should be some kind of new duties provided from the SAIME to the consulate to reduce the impact that is the absence of the document is creating us, because it could create problems for visa, this could create problems for studies, it could create problems for deportation, different kind of problems. The SAIME is really responsible for all this situation in relation to the documents and identification, because there has been indicated that there is a lack of resources and any other problem, but it has been like maybe 5 years ago that it started, and there should be some response already, some action taken to provide the documents on time and to avoid the problem that we have when the passport is expired. Between some ideas that we have in relation to this problem for national institutions and countries where we are residing, the mainly and the more important to take actions are the nationals. For example, we would like, or we suggest, that the consulate could take a consular mission, and this consular mission goes periodically to those countries that there is no consulate and we need to do the document with them. Because because currently we are facing this problem. The impact is not too high, but this will be really high. There is countries where there is no consulate currently, and where consulate related to the assignment. On these countries, the population is huge. One example could be USA, and they would need to go to Mexico or to Canada if they desire to go. If the Venezuelan decide to go to Mexico, that won't be possible because Mexico doesn't accept people with expired documents. Well, this isn't the case that the passport has been already expired. And for Canada, there is some kind of restriction related now to the COVID. But this problem is probably going to increase if this is not solved soon. Also, we would like, for example, the SIME could provide some other properties or other duties to the consulate that release a bit the pressure on this issue. For example, despite providing the identity card, or maybe providing the passport. That would be there are some ideas, but depending on the situation, it's a decision that the institution has to take. And in relation to the countries where we're residing now, we would like, some countries has been provided already flexibility and understanding about our situation. And they has been accepting us to renew the visa even when the document is expired. Not for the whole period, but at least for a period that allow you to live and reduce a bit the pressure on your mind and on your resources as well. Because if you don't have a valid passport, maybe you can't work, you can get a place to live, you can get insurance or different issues that we are getting with that. Studying in the group, we have seen this. Many people have reported that due to they didn't have a valid document, they lost the opportunity to get another nationality, or they couldn't get a visa, or they lost an opportunity of job. This is a huge problem. Well, thanks for us. Thanks for everything. I hope that this gets fixed soon.
Okay, thank you very much, Julio César, for your presentation. Definitely, Facebook groups are a good tool for Venezuelans abroad, and also for us to have an insight into all the problems and the obstacles they face in getting documentation, in this case, passports, when abroad. Before we continue, I would like to invite you to engage in the conversation today through your questions that you can type in the chat section or in the Q&A section that are now open for your participation. Now, let's move on to our next panelist. Let me introduce you to María Gabriela Sarmiento. María Gabriela is a Venezuelan lawyer who graduated from Universidad Central de Venezuela, also has a specialization in international business law from the Bourgogne University in France. María Gabriela is currently a doctoral student in financial regulations, international economic crimes, and restitution of sovereign assets at Universidad de Zaragoza in Spain. She's a co-founder of the nonprofit organization Save My Identity, where she is currently the president and coordinator of the Department of Legal Affairs. Good afternoon to you in Switzerland. María Gabriela, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Jose Rafael. I will start the presentation, and I would like that you confirm it that you're having a look to it. Yeah?
Yes, I can see it right now.
Okay, thanks a lot. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Ligia Bolívar for her recent published work on the impact that the absence of consular services is having on Venezuelans abroad who are deprived of accessing fundamental human rights due to the lack of a valid identification. I also wish to thank Ms. Bolívar for inviting Save My Identity to co-organize today's event together with Hearts in Venezuela and Pasaportes Venezolanos Exterior and the Center of Human Rights of the UCAB. I will talk about Save My Identity petition because you have already heard what are the problems we are facing since a long time. I don't remember now if we said that this started in 2014 or in 2007 or in 2018, but since last year, a group in Pasaportes Venezolanos Exterior decided to publish a petition on change.org that was addressed to Venezuelan authorities, but also to the international community, not only to our receiving countries, but also to international organizations and regional organizations. So I will tell you what is the content of the petition and what has been taken care of, what it has been taken care of partially, and what is still pending. So since between July 2020 and today, June the 3rd, we have 43,580 supporters, but little has been done to improve the situation. So the petition contains 19 requests addressed to Venezuelan authorities, which are the National Assembly or our parliament, the SAEME, which is the Venezuelan authority who is in charge of the expedition of our passports, but it is also in charge in general of our identity, of our documents in general. It's also addressed to the Foreign Relations Ministry, the Foreign Ministry of Internal Affairs, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and to the IOM, the UNHCR, the European Parliament, the OAS, and the Commission of Inter-American Human Rights. First of all, in these 10 months, as I told you, we have these 53,000 supporters, but we have also raised a bit of a statistics to present, to submit physically this petition to the different organizations. We mainly requested to seize the violation of the Venezuelans' human rights and to an identity, of course, and freedom of movement. But that was just the main title. And what we have seen since then is that in March 2021, there was a new regulation that was partially modifying a regulation from 1975 on the identification law. And there are two new purposes, which we found sort of interesting, because the purposes are to guarantee the right to an identity and transparency in the process of issuance of passports, and to ensure the effective exercise of freedom of movement. So this is in the new regulation, March 2021, that was issued, as I said, in 2 months ago. So at least there is some sort of appealing or some sort of interest, no, in starting with the right principles. The point is that this has not been really enacted. I mean, we haven't seen really an enforcement of this regulation, but it just started, and the Venezuelan authority, the SAEME, they said that they will start implementing this new regulation as from mid-April 2021. So it has been a month and a half, and we know that there is COVID and there are measures, and we have flexible weeks and weeks where Venezuelan public authorities do not work, or anybody. So, okay, let's give it a time. Yeah. Now, apart from a general request, we have the 19 requests that we have mentioned before. It's true that according to Article 2 of the new regulation of the ID law, the purpose has been, let's say, taking into consideration what was our main goal. But now, when we talk about that we have requested the SAIME also to apply its Article 5 of the identification law that says that establishes that the state shall guarantee the incorporation of technologies that allow the development of secure, efficient, and coordinated identification systems with the organs of the public power. The SAIME shall oversee the maintenance and permanent and progressive updating of the identification system with the purpose of achieving a system of advanced technology which facilitates access to public services, the exchange of information, and support to the functions of the organs of the state. And in this sense, we've requested the change of the current electronic system with a safe and reliable access and without interruptions in the process of ordering any services, and with no more unjustified cancellations of requests services, with also a safe and certified and fast and reliable online payment process, which should include a refund mechanism for cases in which the system has charged fees more than once. I mean, there is not even an after service or after payment services or something like that. There is nobody to contact when we get problems on this platform where we request such passport extensions and passport renewals. So all in all, the law has been existing since before 2014, but has not been enacted. And well, with this partial reform from March 2021, we don't see how the system can be improved, but well, at least this is what we expect. We expect that our identity is treated on a safe manner, and that is not manipulated by anybody, and that we as Venezuelans are not boycotted on our identity. And especially, we don't want any more corruption in the country, just to issue some identification document, which is the one that makes us access other fundamental human rights. We also requested the SAIME to enable this online platform or system to update the process status in real time, because that was one of the problems. Once you make your request, then you're going to spend a year just waiting that the status changes from one status to the other. It makes no sense. And after 1 year, you can get the whole process lost because for some strange platform reason. We asked the SAIME to streamline the process of obtaining passports and extensions thereof, and restore consulates the power to issue national travel or temporary identification documents and to extend the validity of the expired passports. I know perfectly that it has been said that there are no consulates and that they cannot provide any service and so forth. But at least in those countries where still there is a Venezuelan consulate, the consulate should be granted. I mean, in the law, if you read the text of the identification law, it says that the consulates are like support the activity or the SAIME in general. I mean, they help providing these passports, issuing these passports and IDs. So why not just to do it? At least in those consulates that still exist. We have also requested the issuance of passport extension, which are valid for more than 2 years, and the renewal of passport for a period which is superior of 5 years. I mean, at least 10 years, like in most of the countries, unlike our national ID, which is issued for 10 years. And yes, finally, there is something that has been taken care of legally in the regulation of March 2021. It has been taken care of. And now, yes, the passports of adults can be issued for 10 years. And but still, and for logical reasons, the passports of minors from 0 to 3 years old, well, they are issued for 3 years with no possible extension. Then you need to issue a new passport because it's an issue of taking a new picture, no, of these toddlers. And the passport of minors between the age of 4 and 17 is issued for well, a period of 5 years. Okay, but something has been taken care of. And but still we were really preoccupied when we read that one requires a valid national ID to renew the passport or to request an extension. I mean, we don't have any more national IDs which are valid. I mean, we might be 6.5 million Venezuelans abroad, and since already quite a long time, and we cannot even process a request from abroad to get these IDs. The consulates we have contacted, they said, well, that existed already in the previous regulation, but it has never been asked for. So, okay, we can say on the good faith of the civil servant, we will rely to request a new passport without the valid national identification. On another topic, we've requested the Venezuelan authorities to seek rapid solutions to solve the problems related to the passports of Venezuelans abroad, considering among the possible solutions that Venezuelan consulates should be given necessary hardware and software and material for the issuance of this national ID, new passports and extensions, especially the national ID for kids who are reaching the 9th year old. That year is basic in law in Venezuela, because as from the age of 9, kids are legally requested to have this ID to renew a passport or to request for a passport, and abroad we cannot ask for that. So these are problems that have to be solved, but there is, at least we haven't seen any improvement on that either. On other topics, we have requested the opening of an investigation, and last year in July 2020, we were invited to a session at the parliament, at the Venezuelan parliament, to talk about our proposal on a new identification system based on blockchain technology, but also to request the opening of an audit and also an investigation on all the companies that have been providing or that have been managing that online payment in the SAIME platform. Why? Well, because thousands of Venezuelans have paid more than once the service that has never been received anyways. And there is no refund. There is no possibility whatsoever to claim the problem and to say, hey, well, I should be reimbursed. And so we asked to ourselves, who keeps the money? Is it SAIME? Is it our Venezuelan authority? Or is it these private companies which are all over Latin America and the US, even violating economic sanctions, who are dealing with this online payment in the platform of SAIME? So that has not been taken care of, but at least we were heard at the Venezuelan parliament on this topic. So the last part are requests that were made not to Venezuelan authorities, but to the international community. And the international community and understood as the international organizations, regional organizations, depending on where we live, and the migration authorities of our residing countries. And we were requesting, okay, we need, I mean, we need some sort of support. I mean, international protection. I mean, that is at least subsidiary international protection we should receive when we fall into this vulnerable situation where we find ourselves even living for 10 years or 20 years abroad, but with one nationality, the Venezuelan. We fall into this problem of not having not even an identity to identify ourselves or to request services as the ones that have been mentioned by the previous speakers. So what did we say? Okay, maybe you accept that decree of the interim presidency of May 2019 that said, okay, the countries that recognize this interim presidency should also accept that the expired passports have been extended, automatically extended for 5 years as from the date of the expiration. But of course, I mean, if you don't even have a legal gazette, official bulletin where you can find that decree of the interim presidency, and that you can, I don't know, ask for apostille, or, you know, to have something in hand which looks official, to go to the migration authorities and say, hey, look, I have this from my interim president. I mean, it's a joke. You cannot just print that paper from the internet and say that this is official and that this is from the interim presidency and that that should be accepted. I mean, there should be some sticker in the passport or something. So since we don't have any of that, we request the countries, the hosting countries, to accept our passport just as they are. Expired. I mean, there are enough reports online in several languages explaining what the problem is. I mean, we have, I don't want to talk about failing states, but we have a state that cannot provide any more public services since a long time. And this alters the public order. And when the public order is altered, and we can suffer a prejudice because of this, we are subjects of international law, which require international protection, subsidiary international protection. And what I would say, just to finish, is that we would like to submit a proposal to the IOM, to the UNHCR, even to ICAO, to make 2 or 3 optional optional IDs on how to do that, and on how could they endorse or support the Venezuelans, which are more than 6 million abroad, or almost the size of the number of inhabitants in Switzerland or Austria, and this should be taken care of to comply with the objectives of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. And objective number 4 says clearly, ensure that all migrants have proof of legal identity and adequate documentation. I stop here telling you it's true. The path is long, and we need, of course, an identity to cross that path. But there is, let's say that there is hope, and that we will have at least partial support or even recommendations from this international organization. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Maria Gabriela, for showing us how civil society can engage in demanding the right to identity to Venezuelan nationals abroad and also to Venezuelan nationals at home. Definitely Save My Identity is doing a great job. Before we move on, remember that you can post your questions at the chat or Q&A section at the bottom of your screen at any time during the seminar. Also remember that the link to the report, both in Spanish and English, is now available in the chat section. Our next panelist is Irene Cardona. Irene is a clinical psychologist with a specialization on social and organizational psychology and clinical neuropsychology. Since 2014, she is the director of the interdisciplinary group Psychologists Bitácora with offices in Ireland and Spain. Irene is going to discuss the psychological impact on migrants of instability caused by an irregular migration status. Irene is going to speak in Spanish, for which I would like to remind the audience of the option for interpretation that you can find in the bottom right of your screen. Once again, make sure you mute the original audio to avoid overlapping. Irene va a hablar en español, por lo que le sugerimos a las personas que están usando interpretación en español desactivar la opción en este momento para que puedan escuchar la voz directamente desde Irene. Buenas tardes, Irene, en Irlanda. Gracias por estar con nosotros el día de hoy. Puedes empezar.
Hola, José Rafael. Un saludo a todos, a María Gabriela, Julio César, Ligia. Muchísimas gracias por la invitación, a esta extraordinaria invitación y todo el trabajo duro que están haciendo. Realmente el compromiso que tienen en esta labor, creo que a cada uno de nosotros no solo nos ilumina y además nos pone a pensar en la realidad que estamos viviendo tantos venezolanos en el exterior, en este caso, y bueno, a lo que vamos a reflexionar hoy con relación a la ausencia de servicios consulares y las consecuencias que esto tiene, que sabemos que además de las consecuencias sociales, también podemos reflexionar sobre lo psicológico que a todos o a cada uno de nosotros desde la subjetividad nos atañe. Hemos preparado en representación de nuestro grupo Psicólogos Bitácora una muy breve reflexión para, bueno, en estos minutos que tengo para poder ofrecer nuestro aporte, voy a hacer una pequeña lectura para la reflexión que va en función a lo que hemos ido recogiendo, hemos ido investigando, se ha ido estudiando de cada uno de nuestras pacientes cuando señalan las problemáticas que se les presentan en los países donde se encuentran cuando hay una ausencia de consulados o también, tenemos que decirlo, pues una gestión ineficaz o carencia de información para dar respuestas de ese derecho que tiene cada venezolano a la identificación. Entonces, algunas de las consideraciones voy a leer sobre el malestar psíquico a causa de la ausencia de servicios consulares de los venezolanos en el exterior. Y en este sentido también, como producto de una experiencia personal, yo como venezolana ahora en Irlanda, bueno, también he sido víctima de todo esto que está ocurriendo por, en este caso en Irlanda, la ausencia que hay de un consulado, ¿no? Entonces tenemos que buscar cuál es el consulado más cercano para poder hacer nuestras gestiones, no solo los pasaportes, sino tantas gestiones que un consulado como deber tendría que ofrecer. En este sentido, podemos decir que, citando la Organización Mundial de la Salud, que ha definido la salud mental, que no es solamente la ausencia de una enfermedad mental detectable, sino un estado de bienestar en el cual el individuo realiza sus propias habilidades, puede trabajar productiva y satisfactoriamente y es capaz de contribuir con su comunidad. ¿Qué quiere decir esto para nosotros desde el punto de vista psicológico? Ante el desamparo que cada uno de los venezolanos que están afectados por esta situación, que leemos en sus, no solamente por lo que nosotros como psicólogos recibimos en los dichos de nuestros pacientes, sino lo que leemos en los distintos grupos, y en este caso en un grupo que venimos siguiendo desde hace ya un buen tiempo, que aporta soluciones a los venezolanos, que es el Grupo de Pasaportes Venezolanos en el Exterior, que dirige Julio César López y Milagros Pimentel, a quienes admiro y respeto muchísimo por la labor que están haciendo, la cantidad de preguntas, de comentarios y de inquietudes que tienen. En primer lugar, por la desinformación que cada consulado quizás en su competencia ignora, y luego, por supuesto, la ausencia de gestiones que tienen que hacer cada uno de los consulados. Entonces, recogiendo toda esta información y estudiando desde la subjetividad de cada uno de los consultantes, podemos decir que aunque la salud mental se halla en la subjetividad, sabemos que al encontrar obstáculos para poder trabajar o estudiar, esto puede afectar a la capacidad que un sujeto tiene para diseñar objetivos y proyectos de vida, así como disponer de los recursos necesarios para la consecución de sus proyectos, y por supuesto que esto no se logra sin una plena participación del sujeto en la sociedad. En este sentido, cuando un venezolano se encuentra privado de este derecho, cuando un venezolano no puede resolver su situación de identidad o cualquier otro trámite consular, esto le va a afectar no solamente a nivel económico, que pueda ser una persona productiva, que pueda trabajar, llevar el alimento a su hogar, sino que también esto va a afectar psíquicamente por la responsabilidad que cada uno de nosotros tiene en poder trabajar, en poder hacer y en poder lograr los objetivos que nos hemos planteado. Entonces lo vemos mucho en jóvenes universitarios que emigran, que tienen que mantener sus visas de trabajo, como en el caso de acá de Irlanda, donde una de las mayores preocupaciones que tienen estos venezolanos jóvenes y también otros venezolanos que vienen a hacer algún tipo de estudio universitario, máster, no tener la oportunidad de poder gestionar su documentación. Esto, sin duda alguna, tiene una grave consecuencia a nivel psíquico. Por lo tanto, para que haya salud mental en una sociedad, sabemos que deben existir condiciones idóneas para que los sujetos puedan vivir en un estado de bienestar y, por supuesto, en una vida más vivible. Actualmente, muchos venezolanos padecen de un gran malestar mental a consecuencia de estos servicios consulares. Son muchos los casos que atendemos psicológicamente en consulta y también que sabemos en los distintos países, incluso en los países donde hay consulados, por la ineficacia de sus gestiones, cuántos venezolanos en largas esperas por una atención, por recibir el trato con respeto y, por supuesto, esa confianza que debería tener el venezolano en el exterior con su consulado. ¿Cuántos de nosotros sabemos que esto va generando, es como un efecto bola de nieve, cómo se va generando una tensión, y en este caso genera un signo que podríamos decir que puede producir un estado de angustia, dando como consecuencia también la ansiedad. Entre los principales síntomas que nosotros hemos encontrado en vista de la preocupación de tantos venezolanos se encuentran, hemos recogido algunos de los más importantes, el insomnio. Cuántas noches de trasnocho de cada uno de estos consultantes nos dicen y nos cuentan su angustia, no solo porque tener que atravesar este impacto que tiene que ver con la migración, que se sabe que se experimentan situaciones de duelo, en primer lugar por la pérdida de ese arraigo, de ese lugar que se tiene en el país de origen, y el atravesar sus fronteras, tener que buscar una estabilidad económica. Si esto también le sumamos, tener que poder lograr esta tramitación de documentación, evidentemente son muchas las noches de insomnio de cada uno de estos consultantes. Insomnio es uno de los síntomas que hemos encontrado. Luego, por supuesto, la ansiedad, cada uno desde la subjetividad, sabemos que los síntomas no son igual para todos, pero sí uno de los elementos que puede irrumpir incluso en poder avanzar en un tratamiento psicológico es cuando estos problemas no resueltos, que son problemas que van en función, por supuesto, de algo que no depende de uno en este caso, sino que depende de un otro, en este caso un agente, que debería proveer toda la documentación necesaria y poder agilizar los trámites. Entonces, la ansiedad es otro de los síntomas. Pues pacientes han remitido que no se pueden concentrar, este es otro de los síntomas, falta de concentración en sus actividades diarias. En el caso de la búsqueda de trabajo, no poder tener una visión de lo que se quiere hacer o de lo que se puede hacer clara justamente porque no tienen resuelto algo esencial como una documentación legal. También la inestabilidad emocional, porque, vuelvo a repetir lo mismo, al tener esta dificultad de poder contar con la legalidad, ya sea para solicitar una renovación de visa, como es el caso acá de Irlanda, ya sea porque se va a hacer un trámite que tiene que ver con trámites de estudios, apostillas y todo esto que antes los consulados ofrecían. Evidentemente esto trunca el destino de este estudiante, que muchos de ellos vienen, estudiantes, trabajadores y todas aquellas personas que vienen, en algunos casos o muchos de los casos sabemos que vienen con recursos limitados, no solo acá en Europa, sino los que viajan a otros destinos en Latinoamérica con la crisis que hay humanitaria de Venezuela. Estos venezolanos no solo se les suma el cansancio, el agotamiento físico y mental de la migración, la responsabilidad también que esto implica, el llevar el alimento a sus familias, sino también sus propios proyectos personales, como lo decía al inicio, que no puede haber una claridad en esto. Esto implica una inestabilidad emocional, no hay confianza no solo en el sistema, sino que también implica que no se pueda hacer planes a futuro. Es decir, no se pueden crear proyectos cuando no se tiene claro incluso la propia identificación para hacer una inscripción en una universidad o para abrir una cuenta de banco. Todas estas cosas tienen sus consecuencias para el venezolano en el exterior, y la tristeza recurrente. Pacientes que consultan con nosotros, muchos de ellos que vienen a consultar por las dificultades y duelos que se atraviesan cuando emigran. Luego viene la tristeza, que evidentemente, como decimos, el caso por caso, cada caso es distinto, pero se le suma ese elemento donde muchos de los consultantes, nuestros pacientes, tienen eso que algunos pueden decir con estas palabras, una piedra en el zapato. Es decir, que tienen algo que no los deja avanzar. No solamente por los propios miedos que cada uno de forma subjetiva podemos tener cuando enfrentamos un nuevo reto, sino que esto que no depende de ellos los hace sentirse vulnerables y sobre todo desamparados, que es uno de los afectos para el ser humano más difíciles de enfrentar, el desamparo, el sentirse que están desamparados, desprotegidos, como es incluso el nombre que tenemos hoy en día, que no tenemos esa defensa los venezolanos en el exterior. Por supuesto, tenemos que decir que esto ha constituido un factor fundamental para atender esta situación. Nuestro grupo de psicólogos Bitácora ha ofrecido incluso actividades voluntarias de atención psicológica para aquellos migrantes en diferentes países que están muy angustiados por la situación de sus pasaportes, por la imposibilidad, incluso en el caso de Irlanda, cuando tienen que viajar a Reino Unido, por ejemplo, a tramitar sus pasaportes, y el bloqueo que hay con el consulado venezolano en Londres, en Reino Unido, donde ni siquiera pueden ofrecer un servicio de courier por la situación que tienen de bloqueo con el Reino Unido. Esto también implica no solo una inversión para estos venezolanos de dinero que tienen que tomar en cuenta, sino la dificultad y la angustia que es tener que encontrar una persona en Reino Unido para que les pueda enviar su pasaporte, tener que confiar. Entonces, se suman muchos elementos que van a afectar, que va a traer como consecuencia un impacto psicológico. Y diferentes organizaciones, en este caso, que han colaborado, que van haciendo eco, como es en este caso, estamos trabajando sobre esto, sobre los derechos, la violación de derechos de los venezolanos, van a contribuir a que se vayan abriendo luces con relación a este sentido y buscar soluciones. Pero esas soluciones, que no dependen solo de nosotros, evidentemente, dependen de instancias internacionales que puedan venir ayudar a esto. Entonces, nosotros, ¿cuál es nuestra labor desde el punto de vista psicológico? En primer lugar, atender a la necesidad de cada uno de estos venezolanos que sufren, y realmente se sufre mucho. Uno lo puede ver en los diferentes grupos, cuando consultan, la manera incluso como escriben, se puede leer entre líneas o incluso explícitamente cómo los síntomas mentales afectan hasta la manera de expresarse, de cómo estos venezolanos agresivamente muchas veces pueden hacer consultas con esa desesperación detrás, esa desesperación a cuestas, que buscando desesperadas soluciones acuden a estos valiosos grupos como el que lleva Julio César y Milagros Pimentel para encontrar soluciones que no deberían de ser dispuestas por organizaciones no gubernamentales. Esto debería de ser una competencia de cada uno de los consulados. Y por último, para cerrar, debemos tomar en cuenta que la problemática que existe ahora mismo con los venezolanos en el exterior, porque sabemos que los venezolanos en Venezuela también tienen otros padecimientos graves, pero esto es un problema de salud pública, esto es un problema de salud mental. Son muchos los venezolanos que acuden y piden citas en los sistemas sanitarios, en el caso acá en Irlanda, también en España, por la falta de soluciones por parte del consulado venezolano en España, y sabemos de otros donde esto va a implicar consecuencias psíquicas que en muchos de los casos, por ejemplo, como en estructuras psicóticas, pueden haber desencadenamientos, brotes psicóticos o depresiones que, por supuesto, tienen que ser tratadas de forma permanente, por lo menos en el tiempo en que se pueda curar. Así que creo que esto es un tema que tenemos que seguir reflexionando, tenemos que tomar en cuenta y, por supuesto, tratar de encontrar algunas soluciones desde la tribuna que ocupamos cada uno. Así que muchísimas gracias a todos por su escucha y por el tiempo que se han tomado para participar en esta gran oportunidad de evento que se ha hecho hoy. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Irene, very much for your presentation. Yes, many times we take identity documents for granted, but not having them has an impact on the well-being of Venezuelan nationals abroad. Before we move on to the Q&A session, I would like to offer our apologies, given that our last panelist will discuss the good practices of receiving countries to avoid conditions of irregularity for the Venezuelan population, could not confirm his participation in today's seminar. So, in consequence, we now move to entertain your questions. We have a few questions here in our chat and in the Q&A section. And I'm going to begin. I have a question here from Nady Freites that I believe Ligia can answer this question. Nady Freites is a journalist from TVV and Vivo Play. She's asking if you keep an approximate registry of how many Venezuelans nationals are affected abroad by the absence of consular services.
Thank you, José Rafael. And there is also a question by Oilda in the chat. I would like to take first. Yes, let's go with Nady Freites. There is not an official estimation of how many people are affected, but only in Colombia we have 1.7 million people. In the United States we have almost 500,000, 465,000. In Brazil, 260,000 people. So that's more or less roughly 2.5 million people. I wouldn't say they are trapped. Because I insist that the passport is one of the problems. There are other problems, such as, for example, if there is a new baby, they cannot register it as a Venezuelan. If somebody dies, there is no way to register that disease in the country where that person was living. And even worse, if someone, for example, dies in Venezuela and have properties, but one of the sons or daughters is living outside the country in a place where there is no consular service, that person cannot even send a power to a relative or to a lawyer in Venezuela to process this the inheritance or whatever it's called, herencia. The passport, again, is one of the issues, but it's not the only one. There are so many different problems for people that have no access to consular services. That's and as I say, is more than 2.5 million. And going to the other point that about representation in the Netherlands or in Brussels, not all the countries have diplomatic representation or consular services in all countries of the world. So it is perfectly valid that a consulate provides services to its citizens in different countries. So in theory, there should be no problem with Venezuelan citizens in the Netherlands being served by a consulate located in Belgium. Besides, I mean, it's easier to take a train from the Netherlands to Belgium than from Caracas to Bogota, for example. What is unacceptable is that there is a closure of consular relations and no alternatives are presented for the procedures of citizens of that country. And that is happening with Venezuelan population living in Colombia, in Paraguay, in the US, in Brazil, for example. Normally, if a country suspends consular services in one country, it delegates that responsibility to the services of another country. But that is not happening in the case of Venezuela. When Chavez, for example, broke relations with Israel back in 2009, he reached an agreement with Spain to serve Venezuelans living in Israel. And Israel also reached an agreement with another country to serve its citizens in Venezuela. That is normal, but that is not happening with Venezuelan citizens. So what we want to stress is the defenseless, as the title of the report says, situation of Venezuelans abroad. And I leave it there. Yeah, I leave it there.
Great, thank you very much, Ligia. We also have other comments that probably Julio César can refer to. For example, we have Katiuska from Paraguay that she tells about all the problems derived from the recognition the Maduro government amid the political crisis of 2019. And she says something that's very striking, that she feels she's becoming like a hostage, a prisoner of the receiving country, because she doesn't have the opportunity to get her documents. And the same we have in a similar comment from René Abreu in Canada. He's requested a passport, but he feels very uncertain about the response from the authorities on when he's going to be able to have her passport. This is some of the stories, you know, of Venezuelan people abroad that feel very helpless, you know, in the middle of this problem. Maybe some of you can make a comment on that. Maybe Julio César.
Yeah, there's a big problem that currently all of us that are living, well, it's not even only those that we are living on a country without a consulate, because this is happening even on those countries that there is a consulate, but we are not getting the documents. Like, I mean, the main problem is not the consulate, it's the root of this problem in relation of documentation is SAIME. The SAIME should create, like, if they, as their goal should be create policies that allows maybe the consulate or their system to respond faster to us. Because, for example, if you lose you are on holidays, and I know you are on a country that there is no consulate, and you are going there, maybe you lost your wallet, or I don't know, you were stolen, they stole your wallet and your passport and everything. How could you do to go back to the country where you are currently living? if you don't have a passport, if you don't have an identity, something that to validate your identity. This is a big problem for any country, and more in those that we don't have any consulate, because the other thing is that happens is that once the document arrives to the consulate that is in another country, and if, for example, your passport has been expired, you can't do anything. And for the reason, one of the premises that we are asking for, or the help that we are asking for, is like to delegate some activity to the consulate to provide a better service in relation to documentation. And due to this problem, because this is not going to be fixed soon, we know, and more new in how the institution works in Venezuela, we would like to ask to the countries where we are resident now to check the possibility to, I know, maybe adopt a temporary travel permit. I know that in Ireland there is, and even in some other countries you could request for a travel passport, but this is not in all the countries. And this is important, like to try to get the help from the country where we are living, and also the most important is trying to get the help and the solution from our country, because the problem is on our country, it's not the country where we are living. Thanks. Is that I could provide for this.
No, Julio César, I'm having trouble listening to you. I can hear you very well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Julio César. I think Julio César is done with his answer. We have time for one more comment. It's coming from a person that says, what are the solutions available for Venezuelans living in the USA that require a new passport? Maybe Maria Gabriela can help us with that. I don't know if Safe My Identity has or works in the USA with Venezuelans in the USA.
No, we don't have a chapter in the USA. We work with people in the USA. Maria Herrera, a lawyer in Florida. She was a panelist in at the beginning of our events on migration and international protection, and she said that there are, like in Colombia, different types of programs that protecting, temporarily Venezuelans, but I cannot talk about the recent modifications or changes that have been taking place after the new elections, because she was with us in December 2020, and that was the last information I received, so I cannot help on that. What I know is that, for example, for the consulate, if I understood well, Venezuelans in the US are supposed to go to either Canada or Mexico, which is what I understood, but there are people here from Mexico and in contact with the Mexico consulate that could confirm this or not. Thank you.
I could provide some.
Yes.
Yeah, I could provide some advice in relation to that as well. Well, for Canada, as Maria Gabriela commented, there is Mexico and Canada as main options for the new passport. The problem happens when, for example, to Mexico, you can't go with an expired passport. You need a valid passport. That's the main problem now, that with the COVID, everything is delayed, and they are postponing or calling off the appointments for the captures. And one other option that we were like planning to ask to SAIME or consulate is try to create a way that they could get these details, the fingerprints and the picture, without need to be presential, because for example, Colombia is one. The good thing for Colombia is that they are beside Venezuela, but even though in Venezuela the you are not getting the document fast. That take time. And then, as Ligia comments, there is 1 million of Venezuelans living there. It's a big amount. In USA, it's around 500,000, big amount as well. And the option that was used before for USA was Canada. Canada and USA, they have some kind of agreement where you could go to Canada, but I don't remember the document on our group. We have a document where there is somebody had the experience, do the paperwork, and got the permit to go to Canada to take the document or to take the picture and leave the details for the renewal of the passport. But that happened not on COVID time. Now with the COVID, everything is different, and nowadays Canada is closed. They have the frontier closed, and that could be a big problem nowadays. Like, I know that there was a way to go there, but for example, if you don't have if you ask for asylum on USA, I think that probably you can't do it.
Okay, thank you very much, Julio César, for your answer. Yes, sadly, many times there is no an easy question or an easy answer for the needs of Venezuelans, in this case in the USA, to get their passports. This is why it is so important to raise awareness with this kind of reports, with this kind of events, so that the authorities, both in the receiving countries and also the international community, can take measures in order to alleviate a little bit the suffering of Venezuelan nationals abroad. That question, we have reached the end of today's session. I would like to thank Ligia, Julio César, María Gabriela, and Irene for their participation, as well as every one of you in the audience who made this conversation so fruitful. I would like to remind you that you can access the full report and the video on the impacts of the absence of consular services on the rights of the Venezuelan population abroad on the website of the Human Rights Center at cdh.ucab.edu.be, or directly from the link that we have shared with you in the chat section. You may also follow the Andrés Bello Catholic University Human Rights Center, Hearts on Venezuela, Pasaportes Venezolanos, and Save My Identity on social media at the handles we provided you in the chat section. And also don't forget that more information on the work of Venezuelan civil society is available at heartsonvenezuela.com. Thank you very much for your attendance today, and we'll see you next time.